Hey everybody, it's Tom Mason, and I'm back with another sculpting video. This is part 3, the final part of sculpting hands. I'm sorry, I've apparently started to lose my voice a bit, so hopefully you have no trouble understanding me. But anyways, on this part, it will be covering sculpting an open hand, whether the fingers are completely spread out or if it's just open and not making a fist. No matter what form you're doing, you can use this principle to make that sort of hand. So in this case, I think I sculpt it with the fingers spread out. Basically, this is the most extreme way you do it. So you'd have individual fingers that you need to sculpt. So what I've started with here is I've got my based armature, and what you do is you leave the main steel wire, the 24 gauge steel wire, which is what I use to sculpt with. You leave that extended out for the hand. And then what I'm doing here is I'm wrapping around 2 pieces of 28 gauge brass wire. Those 2 pieces are folded around into a little loop that you place over the steel armature wire. So it takes it can be a little tricky from times, but get the initial loop as close to the diameter of your armature wire as possible. That way they will slip on. There'll be a little bit of friction. They won't slide off too easily, but you will usually have to take 2 sets of pliers and either pull the brass wire apart in order to tighten that or kind of pinch it. Right here, I'm started to glue it. After I get the wires into place, I put a little dab of glue on it. Normally, I dab it on with, I put the glue on another piece of wire and then dab the connection with that glue. But I think here eventually, if I'm not doing it right now, I end up having to put just the glue directly on the join because it wasn't getting quite enough there. Once you have the wires glued in place, that's when you start to bend the brass wires to kind of form a hand. So the loop parts will be the main meat of the hand. The wires themselves, once you bend them out to extend forward, those will be the individual figures. And I usually try and make it so that basically where the the brass wire that loops around the steel wire, I try and make that essentially where the knuckles would be, so that basically anything past that can be very thin and trim, essentially just fingers. And if there is more spool, you can kind of hide it in the wrist and the actual palm of the hand. And I think you saw there that I ended up having to put a little extra glue there. And now you trim it up. But yeah, after you get everything bent into place, you trim the wires up. Obviously, as you can see, I think the steel wire is the middle finger. Then I have 2 wires as the ring and pinky, and the other 2 as the index and the thumb. That's typically how I do it. If it were to be a 4-fingered hand or a 3-fingered hand, something like that, I would typically make the steel wire be the index finger. Once everything's in place, I mixed up a small amount of Greenstuff, and at this point you're just trying to kind of set the join a little better. So you just need a very small amount, and you press it on both sides of the brass wire that's wrapped around the steel wire. And once you're done spreading this on very thin, I'm using a clay shaper. Obviously, if you need to, you can use it. If you don't have that, you can, or color shaper, you can use something else, but these are great for working with putty. Alright, now that this is all cured, I let it sit for a little while. You can put it under a putty oven. You could go straight into putting the fingers on here, but I usually like to let that part set just to make sure that the new armature doesn't feel or anything. Anyways, you mix up some putty, and it's and start laying on a small bit around each individual finger. I usually start with the middle ones, the middle finger and the ring finger, because it's easier to kind of spread the putty on and form those without having the putty on the outer ones first. And I think it's about this point that I had to switch out my mat because it wasn't focusing, so hopefully you guys can see a little better. And I'm just continuing to lay in all the fingers with the individual amounts of putty. And it's about this point that I start to regret using a green background while sculpting with Greenstuff. Normally I would use, I have the preference for ProCreate or a mix at least. But I have to admit, whenever I'm working on very small bits like this, where there's a very small contact area, I really do like the Greenstuff because it's so much more stickier than most of the materials, and it won't pop off, which is great. Now here's where I start to finish off the hand by working on the palm. We start there. I like to start by adding a little bit of putty where the thumb connects to the palm of the hand. That's a nice, very easily defined shape. So you want to make sure and get that form nice and visible. Then you can kind of smooth in to cover up the rest of the palm, the lower part. Then I put another piece on the top, basically the inside of the knuckles there, to finish the inside of the palm. After that, you turn it over and add a little bit of putty to the back of the hand. I usually just put one piece that I smooth down to form the back, leaving a little bit more material up around the knuckles. You want to make sure you smooth all of that down into the fingers. Try and basically get as much of a smooth, even surface with the putty flowing into all the extremities as you can before making the knuckles. Once you get it down to that, then you can start pressing in with either, the flat edge or round edge of your color shapers, or if you have another rounded probe tool, those are great. I think here I'm just kind of trimming it a little too much. But anyways, you kind of draw a line back from the knuckles back towards the wrist to kind of create the definition in the hands that you have from your hand bones there. And just keep working on it until you get it to look just right. Make sure you use a lot of reference. Look at your own hand. It's right there when you're not using it to sculpt, obviously. But it always, like with everything, takes some practice. But I hope this helps everyone. Please like this video. Feel free to share it on any of your social media networks. If this is the first time visiting the channel, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. I do a video every other week about miniatures. It's typically sculpting tutorials, but I do lots of other cool stuff like interviews with other sculptors, talking about sculpting, talking about miniatures, how cool they are, and I think you'll like it. So thanks for watching and keep sculpting.